Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, and welcome to the Karey Carbaugh podcast, episode number 26. And I've titled this podcast, Bloom Where You're Planted. And if I may welcome in my Spanish-speaking friends for a moment. Bienvenido. Buenas noches, damas y caballeros, chicos y chicas, niños de todas edades. Y bienvenidos a el Karey Carbaugh podcast número 26. Once again, welcome. Thank you for allowing me to do that. I have several people that have been watching these on a regular basis who are Spanish speaking, friends of mine. And so I'd like to welcome them in, and I appreciate the rest of you allowing me to do that. I haven't had any complaints, so I appreciate that. My name is Karey Carbaugh, and so that's the name of the podcast, the Karey Carbaugh podcast. For those of you who don't know me, I am a person with low vision. I have limited vision. I'm considered legally blind, and I am a Christian. Tonight's message is going to have a little bit more of a Christian flair than some of them do, because I wanted to use some examples from the Bible to make a point here tonight. So I hope that you'll allow me to do that. I know not all of my followers are believers. For those who are not, I hope that you'll take the message that's intended from this. I think this is a message that can be applicable to all of us, whether or not you believe in God or a supreme being. I happen to believe in God, and that's where my focus comes, and my rock and compass point comes from, since that is my belief system. So I hope you'll take this message and apply it in a way that's meaningful to you. I'm not going to read specific passages from the Bible tonight. I'm actually going to paraphrase. Once again, I always like to give credit where credit's due, because a lot of these ideas don't come from me. And so tonight's message actually is another one that came out of a recent talk that my pastor Nick gave to a men's group a few weeks ago. I actually took away two different conversations from that talk, and this is the second one. One of them was a couple weeks ago. What did I mean by this? Actually, before we jump into that, I invite you to like this video if you do. If you like it, press the like button, if you would, please. And let me know if you're joining me live or on the replay by dropping an L or R or the word live or replay in the comments. That just helps me to know who's watching this live and who's watching it later. And also, if you have questions or comments, or if you're getting value during this podcast, I always appreciate knowing that in the comments as well. If you would drop the word value or any questions or comments that you might have as we go through this, that would be great. And we'll see what kind of time we have at the end. I may try to respond to those live, or I may jump on afterward and reply to them after this broadcast is over. But let's go ahead and jump in here to the message tonight. Bloom where you're planted. What did I mean by that? Well, there's a few things that I wanted to bring about. Primarily, the message being that even though you might not be where you want to be right now, maybe you're struggling with some difficulties or challenges, maybe you have a disability, maybe you have suffered a loss, maybe a job loss, whatever that difficulty is, I hope you'll take something from this message tonight as we take a look first in the Old Testament, looking at King David. Let me know in the comments if you know anything about King David at all. I think most of us know that he was the little guy that slayed Goliath, the giant, and then became king. But do we really know about David's life. I admit I didn't know a lot about David's life until Pastor Nick talked about him, and then I did a little bit of research. Um, the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel are where a lot of David's life is found. He wrote some of the Psalms and some of the other books and is referred back to in the New Testament. God promised that his descendants would produce a great king in the future, and that later became Jesus. But if we take a look at David's life in particular, he was a shepherd. Who else do we know that sounds like for those of us who are believers? And shepherds were a fairly lowly occupation. Shepherds were people who tended the sheep. And they were not high society people. They were servants. They were very humble people in general. I have a cousin today who's actually a sheep farmer or shepherd. And it's not an easy life, even today, but especially back then before they had a lot of the technology that we do today. It was a very difficult life. And David had grown up being a shepherd and was chosen to be king when he was fairly young. It's not exactly clear when he was first slated to become king, but it was sometime prior to his battle with Goliath. David, after he was selected by the people to become king, went back into the fields for quite a few years. The timing isn't exactly known, but he became the best shepherd that he could be, and he did that job well. And this is part of the message I wanted to share tonight, is wherever you're at, maybe you're not in the job you are seeking. If you do that job well, or do the task at hand well, eventually you're likely to be noticed. No guarantees, of course, but people notice people who are humble and do a job well. In fact, God even called David a man after his own heart. What exactly does that mean? Does that mean that David was perfect? Well, hardly. If we look in 2 Samuel, there are some references to David having relations with someone who was not at that time his wife. There are many references to things that David didn't do according to God's plan. But what David did do is he repented and he apologized to God. He acknowledged his shortcomings and his weaknesses, which put him in favor with God, even though he had fallen short in many areas of his life. And let's go back now for a moment to his time as a shepherd. He was a shepherd for several years after he was selected to be king. He didn't really want to be king, but he was chosen, and because of that, the predecessor king kind of had it in for him. And when they were being overtaken by the Philistines, who had this big giant, the Israelites were being overtaken by the Philistines, who had this big giant for a ruler, they were looking for someone to take down the giant. And no one came forward to do that until David did. And he, with a slingshot, brought down Goliath, brought down the giant of Goliath. Even after that, though, you would have thought, and I had thought at one point that he just, after that battle, he became king. No, actually not. He was sent back into the battlefields by the current king. I believe it was King Saul. I should have written that down. Um, he was sent back into the battlefields to be killed because King Saul did not want him to be king. And he was going to do everything that he could to make sure that David did not become king. But because David had found favor with God, he was protected. And because he did his job well, which is really the message I want to bring forward tonight, because he did his job well and waited for the right time, biblical scholars believe he was maybe 24, 25 when he slayed Goliath, and he was in his early 30s before he became king. So there were several years in there where he went back into the fields and fought for the military, probably did some sheep herding during that time, and eventually was anointed king. Without going into tons of details about how all that came about, that's not really what I wanted to focus on tonight. The thing I wanted to focus on is that persistence and that continual focus. Although he wasn't particularly focused, as I mentioned, he didn't really want to be king. But in time, he was selected, and he did his duties as king to the best of his abilities as well. Even though it wasn't something he particularly sought out, he was chosen, and once he became king, he did that well too. He had been a good shepherd, a faithful shepherd. He became king and was a faithful king. And because of his faithful following of God as well as faithful ruling of the people, many generations later, the ultimate king came from his lineage. And that was Jesus, for those of us who are believers. And if we look at Jesus' life, it was also very similar. He was a carpenter, another very humble profession. He didn't come from a long line of rulers, although his ancestor way back had been King David. But his family was not royalty. They were very humble people. They didn't even have a place to sleep when he was born. But again, we see mirrored in Jesus' life his faithfulness, and during his childhood and young adulthood, he was a carpenter. He could have, after he taught in the synagogue, taught the leaders when he was about 12 or 13 years old, and the story of him staying behind when his parents left, he could have come out at that point and started preaching. He certainly knew the Bible better than many of the scholars at that time. He could have stepped out and started preaching that day, but he knew that that was not his time. And so he went back with his parents and became a carpenter. I've often wished, as a person who's worked with youth, that the Bible said a little bit more about Jesus' upbringing as a teenager. Unfortunately, we don't have much other than that one story for those of us who are youth leaders to lean into about Jesus and his teenage years. But we can assume that he stayed true. We know that he never sinned, and that he was faithful not only to God but to his earthly parents and to his duties. We can assume that he was faithful to his carpentry, that he learned that trade, even though as God, as the supreme ruler, he could have known that trade. He took the time to learn it. I had a discussion today with one of the other leaders that came out of a question from one of the kids at Vacation Bible School about Jesus and the woman at the well, because they were from different tribes. Would he have known her language? And originally I was thinking, well, he's God. He would have known every language because he created every language through the Tower of Babel. But as I was discussing this with one of the leaders, she pointed out that while he was on earth, he chose to learn the way we learn. Not that he couldn't have done it another way, but he chose to learn things like the trade of carpentry, probably to learn things like the neighboring languages. He would have spoke Aramaic by default because that was the language of his village. Probably knew Greek to some extent, and that may have been the common language of the area. We really don't know for sure. Probably some Bible scholars do know. I am not as scholared in that particular area, but again, not to belabor that point or to stray too far from our conversation tonight, he chose to become human and to be humbled and to learn and grow as a human being. He also several times, when people wanted to shout out from the mountaintop who he was, he said, no, 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 my time has not yet come. Because he knew once that cat got out of the bag, so to speak, that his time would be very limited. And he would not have had the time to do the things that he needed to do here on earth before he was crucified, before the ultimate destination came upon him. So I believe as humans, though, we can take from that our duty and our need, first, to be humble, second, to be true and consistent to our daily task, and third, to be faithful not only to our daily task and to the leaders around us, but also and ultimately to God. And if we follow those principles, God in turn will reward us in time with our ultimate destination and purpose here on earth. So that's where the message came from that I started this with. Bloom where you're planted. Wherever you're at now, flourish. Do the best job that you can. Whatever trials you're overcoming, do the best job that you can. If you are struggling with a loss, maybe a loss of an ability, or an ability that maybe you've never had, if you're a person that's had a disability since birth, like I have, bloom where you're planted. Be faithful and do the task at hand to the best of your ability, and that will be rewarded in time. Maybe not in the way that you initially want, but ultimately in a way that is most fulfilling and fulfills the purpose that God has for each one of us. So I hope you found value in that tonight, and I hope you found encouragement in that story, whether or not you believe in the biblical side of it. I hope that those two characters that I've laid out, that you can get something from that message of hope and encouragement to help guide you and lead you through whatever you're going through in your life. If you have, let me know by dropping the word value or a V in the comments. Let's see how long we've been going here and if we have time. Actually, I think we've been going a little longer than I expected. We've been going about 20 minutes here, so I will jump on after this to answer any of the live comments that have come through. And then I will also keep a watch the next few days and answer any from the replay. If you have gotten value, again, drop a V or value in the comments. Let me know if you're watching live or on the replay. If you like this video, please like if you do. And let me know that. That always helps. If you have questions that you'd like me to cover in future podcasts, I'd be happy to entertain those as well. I seem to not be lacking for material. If you'd like to be added to my email list, drop the word email in the comments or send me a direct message with your email address, and I'd be glad to add you to my email list. I'm starting to put together some more private online events that I'd be glad to invite you to. So with that, I will wish you a great evening, a blessed evening, or a blessed day, depending on when you're watching this. Make it a blessed day for you and for those around you. Do something positive to bless those around you. I'm involved in a vacation Bible school this week, and I'm trying to bless the lives of the kids each day, but I can tell you, absolutely, I have been blessed by each and every one of them, and I hope you find that as well, that you're blessed by the people around you. So make it a great week until we pop on again, and be a blessing to those around you. With that, I will bid you a fond farewell until we pop in again. Bye-bye for now.